Okay, hello Internet family. This is Anjanette Potter, also known as Adam's Rib. Today is September 22nd. It is 11 p.m. And this is my podcast. This is one of my Respectability Politics series. This one is going to go on the Happy Spinster, actually Black Spinster, sorry. Happy Spinster was the old name that I had for it. So this one is going to go, usually my Respectability Politics ones go on Anjanette Speaks, but this one, I may put this on Anjanette Speak as well, but this one is going to go on, the main place I want to stick this one is on Black Spinster. And the reason being because the subject is on, so let me go ahead and get with this title. So this one is how respectability politics kills black women, submission teachings, and Fantasia's Breakfast Club interview, and her husband's IG or Instagram follow-up posting. So let me give you some scriptures, and I'm going to also break some of this down. This is a topic in Christian circles that gets perverted and twisted and very, very misunderstood. And I can remember when I first got saved, I was praying. I was, just sitting in my living room, and I was like, Lord, am I going to have to now become one of these people that stays with their husband and gets beat up and all the other horrible stereotypes about being a saved wife? And the Holy Spirit kind of took me in my Bible and showed me, and these scriptures right here are the ones that I remember looking at, and this has been over 20 some years ago. So the first one is Ephesians 5:22 through 23, 1 Peter 3, chapter 3, verses 1 through 22, and 1 Corinthians 11 and 3, and Colossians 3:18 through 21. So now, I put a lot of verses in here, and the reason that I did, if you go and you read these versions, because I'm not going to read all of this, every single one of these tonight, just because it's just a lot of reading and I have a lot of stuff I need to cover. But if you want to go and read those, go right on ahead, be my guest. And I came out of the Amplified version on each of these because it's one of my favorite versions of the Bible. So, but one thing I noticed with each of these scriptures, for everything that's said for the woman to do, there's a set of corresponding scriptures for the men. And so I did a blog post on one of my blog posts years ago, a while back, and it might even be under the I think it might be under the Sex, Food, and Family blog. So I also had a series called Are You Sure You Want to Get Married? And then I said, are you sure you want to get married? Because, it's usually how people say it to you. And it has to do with, people nitpicking and telling you if you don't want to jump through a few pre-prescribed hoops that you're not ready for marriage. And like I said before, I think, like I have said in the past, I think some women groom you for their husbands because they don't take into account that, men are individuals. Not every man is wanting the same thing from a woman. So, and, one of the ways that you do is you spend time with somebody to see if they're right for you first. So many of you probably know, it's been on the internet, Fantasia gave an interview on the Breakfast Club. and she talked about a number of things. It was a half-hour interview. It's on YouTube if you want to look it up. I'm going to have links to the interview, and I'm also going to have links to her husband's IG follow-up. So she talked about many things. She talked about PTSD was one of her songs, and it has to do with post traumatic sex syndrome, and how brother wasn't satisfied, brother not satisfied or not holding down his end sexually. So she covered a whole lot of things, but the most controversial thing that came up was she started to talk about submission. So for those of you who don't know, Fantasia is born again. She she's been raised in church, I believe, and basically she was talking about and submission kind of is a very controversial subject in many churches. But I want to talk about, I'm not going to go into her husband's background. She mentioned that she only married him only 3 weeks after meeting him, and don't even really want to criticize that. But I've been through a lot with some churches here recently. Been there some disputes, and some of it has to do with submission. So one of the things that Fantasia talked about was, that hit a nerve with a lot of the sisters is, you're not submitting, so that's why you don't have nobody. It's not true. And so let me talk about, for one thing, let me say this. These scriptures, they're Bible and everything. However, if you look at the Bible, if you read and study to show yourself approved, submission isn't unconditional. God's love is unconditional. God's love is unconditional. There are certain criteria that a man has to meet in order to be hollering about submission. I went to a church, and that pastor was saying, only three men are a woman supposed to submit to in her lifetime: her father, her husband, and her pastor. If they don't fall into those three categories, a woman not supposed to submit. They're not worth submitting to. They're not in God's order. When God does things, He does things in decency and order. So, the word in all of these scriptures, you will see the scriptures that I just gave you. In order for a man to want you to submit, he needs to be your own husband. And the Bible makes special mention of own husband. That means not, the married guy that wants to smash, not your baby daddy, not your live-in lover, not the lesbian that has a crush on you. Yeah, I have to mention it. Legal husband, a man that you are legally married to, a man that you are in legal covenant with. Okay, so everybody, doesn't fall into those categories. Now, I'm not going to be misogynistic like men are and go into, wife material. Wife material and husband material is up to the individual. Because everybody ain't created for everybody. You're not for everyone. That doesn't free you to be belligerent or disagreeable. And, many of you aren't. But, it just, you're not for everybody. Okay? That doesn't mean not work on yourself. That doesn't mean not submit to the Holy Spirit and make the necessary changes. It just means, and, another aspect, it just means, you're just not for everybody. Everybody and not the one for you. Okay? Now, so I covered, that. Another condition, it needs to be in the Lord. And that is 1 Peter 3:6b. Not to be led into sin, not being intimidated or bullied, or be harmed, abused. Now, that particular text, the next verse, which is 3 and 7, in the King James Version, it says that you dwell with your wife according to knowledge. Not, I have a problem when People are being overemphasized or shoved, and submission is being shoved down their throat, but nobody is telling husbands and wives how to get along, how to dwell. Okay? Because even the Bible says that a man is supposed to leave and cleave. How many people are married to somebody and everybody in the family is all in their business, everybody trying to run their marriage, interfering and getting all up in, and I'm not talking about her friends. Way too many times we want to talk about the women's people, but in some cases it can be the man's family. Okay, the people that are in your, when I talk about the sphere of influence and who gets prioritized, I'm constantly saying to people all the time, the people that are of your household that you got to live with need to take priority over anybody outside that household. That doesn't mean that you disrespect everybody and they don't get no consideration at all, but you have to consider the people that are under your household first. The ones that you are responsible for legally, minor children, those that may be away at college, if you're still paying for their education, then yes, they're still part of your household. If you're still financially responsible for them, and I'm not talking about, you're helping them out of the kindness of your heart, but they live someplace else. I'm talking about, like I said, college age. In other words, if they're on break or for the semester or whatever, they're going to be back up under your roof again, then yes, those people, those are the sphere of influence that gets first dibs as far as priority goes. As I said before, the clips are going to be available on couchtalk66.wordpress.com. That's the Black Spinster website. That's the old title for that particular blog. So let me give you the points that I really didn't have a problem with on her talk. Didn't have an issue with. So she talked about working together, the neck and then the head and everything. She also talked about black men and women being set against each other. And one example that I can think of, if you're into antenna TV and old old TV shows, period, old sitcoms especially, that Good Times is on there. So Good Times, there was this one episode. Good Time, Norma Lear to me did a good job in the early seasons of Good Times, where he emphasized a lot of the social economic stuff that many black people, especially because Good Times is set in a project similar to Cabrini Green in Chicago. So, but it's kind of universal because most black people have either lived in the projects, had family that they visited in the projects, different stuff like that. So one of the episodes, Florida and James were kind of set against each other for the same job. Now, there's been a lot of talk here lately and about the conditions that black people have gone through in this country, because we've been here for 5 centuries. But we also have to take into account when people say, well, how come blah, blah, blah? Well, there was several hundred years of slavery. Then there was years of Jim Crow and different other legal sanctions to keep us from voting. There have just been a lot of hurdles. And then the fallout from that, so we've kind of always had to, especially black women, have kind of always had to make the choice between career advancement and keeping our marriage together or keeping our household together. And many times and this is not to blame affirmative action, but many people's attitude toward affirmative action. And if you're familiar with affirmative action law, out of every 100 jobs, affirmative action says at least one of those, I think 10%. So 10 of those jobs, if you got 100 jobs, then 10% of those jobs, 10 of those jobs have to go to a woman or a minority. And so if you have somebody just bound and determined to not hire any more than those 10 jobs, that are set aside for women or minorities, and then they look and they see a brown woman or a black woman, and they're like, I can kill two birds with one stone if I hire this one woman. So guess what that does if you're black and male? If that boss feels like he can fill that position and not have to worry about white women or black men, then guess what? So, being set against each other, if you're being set against each other for jobs and opportunities, it makes it hard. There's been a lot of things that have contributed to the breakdown of the black family. And I can go into that in another post because I don't want to get off on that tangent. But one of the things she talked about was, generational curses related to black men and black women being set against each other economically, especially professionally. Different things of, different type of family breakdowns as far as which resulted in black women having to be heads of households and having to take care of kids and be both mother and father. So she also talked about learning to be able to adjust to each other, and then also being able to learn to adjust to each other after parenting alone. So if you've been a single mom and now you have met somebody you're in love, you want to marry, and now you have to adjust to not being in charge anymore, which, she admitted to herself, for herself, was hard. And I can understand it. I can totally relate after raising two children by myself. If I would have met somebody when my kids were smaller, even the best man, you could have the best man on the earth. And if you are used to having to look out for self and having to look out for two people or more, raising them and having to be over that household, and now you got somebody, and I'm talking about he could be working, bringing home the bacon, doing everything right, and it would still be an adjustment because you would still have to learn how to adjust to this person. You had to learn to live with to adjust to the change in your household. So I also looked at her husband's IG, and I would say I like what he said about men, especially church leaders, abusing submission and using it to control women. And so he had a very, very beautiful speech that he made about why submission gets such a bad name. So I don't, which I'm not. So now, what did I disagree with? So like I said, I'm going to be posting both of these clips for, to look at, so that you can look at both of them and see what, and make up your own mind about what you think about what she's saying. So now, where do I disagree? When she says, so where do I disagree? I disagree with the fact that it feeds into the same stereotype or trope about the angry black woman. So it feeds into the whole disagreeable, combative, angry black woman trope or stereotype. So for those of you who are wondering what a trope is a word used in a non-literal sense to create a powerful image. So the powerful image that we're talking about right now is the angry black woman. So that brings me to my next point. I think it's too broad of an application to all women, especially black women, and it has no regard for the individual woman's situation. You don't know what she's going through, so to say that the solution to single black women's problems is to submit is too broad an application. You don't know what their situation is, and it doesn't take into account the type of men that you're running into or dealing with if you're already married or in a relationship with that person. It plays on your insecurities about never marrying. We've all heard the lonely cat lady stories. And here lately, I've been like, as stray as some of these men want to act, they should be happy to run into a cat lady, because cat ladies are already showing you that they're generous. Anybody that's willing to feed cats that are not their own and has a heart big enough to have all them cats, something to think about. So it plays on your insecurities about never marrying. Like I said, it goes into, like I said, and I'll mention again, my series on, are you sure you want to get married? And I say it that way because that's usually how people say it to you. They say it in such a way that implies, well, if you are not willing to do these steps right here, you're going to be alone. Okay? And it's not really a good thing, and it's very manipulative. So, I'll go into my issues with submission teaching. So, like I mentioned what I found wrong with Fantasia's speech, because, like I said, it plays on your fears, and it also blames you for situations that may not be your fault. And sometimes you just haven't met the right guy. Okay, believe it or not, there are people who are single because they just haven't met the right person. So, my issue with modern submission teachings are the correlation between overemphasis on submission teachings and the likelihood of a woman being abused. Okay? In many forms. It doesn't have to be physical for it to be abused. So, another problem I have is it operates on the assumption that men have it all together and women don't. And like I said, you could just be dealing with somebody that's a bully. One example is the husband complains about the sex life, and the pastor doesn't take into consideration that he may be contributing to the fact that they're not having sex as often as he would like. Okay? And rather than take that into consideration, they try to make up these teachings that make it bad for you, that try to make it sinful for you as a woman to turn your husband down, or say that you don't feel like it. So they contribute to even more stress. They make the situation even more stressful for you, when it could be as simple as, maybe he needs to help you with the housework, maybe he needs to help with the kids, maybe he needs to take a bath, maybe he has sexual appetites that you don't really want to service. You might have a porn addiction. He also may have cheated and gave her a disease, and now she's afraid to fool with him again. Okay, so these are all things that I know, if I haven't had the experience, I know other people have had it. So these are things that have to be considered, and many times a lot of churches want to just legislate sex. And I always have a problem when a church tries to get on some legalistic thing of, well, it's just a sin to turn your husband down. First of all, it's not a sin to turn your husband down. Secondly, you already saw from the scriptures that I gave you, and when you read these scriptures, you will see that God is basically in His Word. Paul, because some of them are letters from Paul. One is, I think, letters from Peter to particular churches that are instructing the men on how to make things conducive in the household so that they will get it on a regular basis. Okay. Submission teachings usually aren't case sensitive, which is what I just said. What works for one household may not work for another household. You can't apply advice to people who have small children in the home to somebody whose kids may already be grown. Okay, so that's two different dynamics that have to be taken into consideration. Or you may have a couple that's childless, don't have a family yet. So those are things that have to be taken in consideration when you try to apply sound counsel to someone. You can't make things even. That's not one of those things that you can really make even across the board, because if you have one family where they may be necessary for them to have two jobs, where you have another one where the husband's income is enough that the wife can stay at home, or maybe you have another situation where the woman is in a profession where she just simply makes more than her husband makes. So those are things to take into consideration. And I also don't like some of them. Another thing that I really don't like is that it can contribute or create a power struggle unnecessarily. So once again, I had someone say, because I'm a movie fan. You've seen the rest of my postings. I'm a movie fan. So someone made the remark, well, what if the guy didn't want to go to movies that I wanted to go to? So I'm like, well, that's not even necessary to have a power struggle, because I know how to go by myself if my husband can't go with me. I also can go with my mother. He's welcome to come with me. 9 times out of 10, if I'm planning on going to see a particular movie, I'm gonna discuss that with my husband beforehand anyway. I'm not just gonna get up and go to the movie and not, because my first thing that I'm probably going to want to do is for us to go together. And if he can't because he has to work or just doesn't necessarily want to see that movie, if it's something I really want to see bad enough, I can go by myself, or I can go with my mother, or I can go with my daughter. I don't understand, that to me doesn't have to be a power struggle. And many times when you have, unfair teachings like that, it leads to there being power struggles for absolutely no good reason. So, those are my thoughts on this whole thing. I may be doing more, because I have a few topics that I want to expound on, also under respectability politicking. So I will be posting more podcasts this week. So I have more, and I still have to do the mass shooting one. So, let me see here. So, I have my little notes. I now have a new blog. So that brings me up to 7 blogs. So 7 being the number of completion. I don't plan on having another blog anytime soon. I'm going to be, for the months of October and November, I will be taking part in Wow Women on Writing's blog book tours again. I'll be making that announcement probably sometime this week. I'll have another post announcing which books I'll be doing, which books they are, which means I have to get started reading the first one before I get going on that. So my new blog is called Rose Gold, and it is a beauty blog. And what I will be discussing is all, just like the music blog is all aspects of music, this will be all aspects of beauty. So it's not just going to be makeup and hair and different other stuff like that. It's going to also be about making yourself beautiful from the inside out. So, like, how do you beautify the inside? How do you handle the junk that you may have inside that may be causing you to be ugly outside? How do you deal with ugly? How do you deal with areas of spirituality that may be, hindering you in certain areas? And also, I'll be dealing with a little bit of image consulting as well. I helped a young man on Facebook one time ace a job interview. He was concerned about having to cut his hair to go to this job interview. And so I said, you can do this keeping your hair like it is. And, not to sound racist or hateful toward white people, but most white people don't know what our hair is supposed to look like. They know if we're well groomed. So what you do is you show up well groomed, keep your hair kind of, on the calm side, be well groomed, and, talk about what qualifies you for the job. Keep the conversation about your qualifications for the job. If they say your hair is neat or say anything about your hair, say thank you or answer whatever question, and then refocus the conversation back on your qualifications for the job. So he did what I told him to do, and he wound up getting the job. So that's going to be on here too. So different things that I think are going to help with your image, how to make yourself basically, makeover type stuff, and not just makeover as far as dressing better, but dressing for success, but also dressing up maybe your attitude for success. So it's going to be beauty from all different aspects. So yeah, there will be makeup and hair things and fashion.